Solid stamps are beautiful, but when you want to take it up a notch and add extra visual interest, it's time to try classic stamp kissing. I promise, it's a rated G technique. Every technique video is narrated live while I'm doing the technique, so you're getting a real-time view of how the whole process works. Pull out the supplies I'm using and create right along with me, pausing as you need. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it. Stamp kissing has been around for a long time. It is a classic technique that was really available to stampers way back in the day because all we had was stamps, right? So we had to come up with a way to make them more interesting. So in this technique video, I'm going to show you a few different ways to do stamp kissing and some pitfalls that you might run into along the way that you need to know about. So for our example, I have a solid stamp, and this is a vase. And it's, of course, you want to have a solid stamp as your base image because you're going to be kissing the texture or pattern or whatever of another stamp onto this solid stamp. So you need to have a solid stamp and you need to have a pattern stamp. Now, whatever you want your pattern stamp to be, it can be. So in this case, I've got some butterflies on this stamp. And because it is photopolymer and it's a little bigger, I'm just having it stuck down to my work surface here. There's no need to do the stamp kissing with the two blocks. This is a little bit bigger. I don't have to worry about getting a stamp. I'm just going to press my stamp into it when the time comes. All right, so first pitfall is that your background stamp may not stamp so well. So I like to condition my stamps. And even though they say that you really only need to condition your stamps the first time, you know, they always get sticky when you clean them off, which is of course great for sticking onto your block, but not always so great for ink. So in order to make sure that I've got a really nice surface here, I use my stamp conditioner, just a white eraser, to get this nice and dull. So that way, when you put your ink on it, it does not bubble up and bead up. It just stays nice and flat on this surface. Okay, so this is your first pitfall. You want to make sure that you've got a nice solid stamp ready to go. Okay, and then I've got a couple of different inks here. I've got Aqua Sky and Buttercup. And then I also have a Distress Oxide. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So when you are doing your kissing here, you're going to want to think about colors and how they work together. So typically like a blue and a yellow is going to make a green. So be aware that when you're working with dye inks that your colors may blend together. So you may not always get what you're looking for. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. If you want to just have a pattern with just your white cardstock, or maybe you're using colored cardstock and you just want to have that pattern on there, you can just go straight for your pattern. So I'm going to go with my Buttercup here, and I'm just going to put it right on the pattern. Right, and I'm going to lift this pattern up with my stamp. So very carefully, I'm going to kiss them together, and you can see that my stamp has picked up the color. All right, and so it's on there, and that's all that's on there. And so now I can stamp this down on my paper. And as you can see, because I conditioned my stamp, I got a nice smooth finish. And I only had to worry about stamping it once because you're never going to realign this perfectly again, even with the stamp positioner. It's just not going to happen. And I've got a beautiful little vase here that has some butterflies on it. So I can die cut this out and it'll look great. If I had done this like yellow on yellow or on maybe a light color cream cardstock, this would look really beautiful. All right, so that's the first way, is to just put the image straight onto your stamp and stamp. Now, if you want to double up, I'm going to just clean this off, and I'm going to use my hand this time just to keep that conditioning going. I want to get all of this surface nice and milky. There we go. Okay, so I'm prepped and ready to go again. This time I'm going to use my Aqua Sky first, and I'm going to get this nice and inked up. All right, so that's nice and inked up, ready to go. Now I'm going to go right back into my pattern. So let me just make sure I've got that covered completely. So I've got my Aqua Sky on here. I'm going to go right into my pattern and very carefully place it on top to get my pattern impressed onto my stamp. All right, so now I've got color and color. If it's been sitting around for a little bit and you want to make sure that your inks are activated, of course, just a little bit of steam will do that, and we can just huff on our stamp a little bit. All right, so I've got a little bit of extra activation there, and now I can stamp this down. All right, so remember what I said about color changes. So here is our project where we just used the yellow, and that is a beautiful shade of yellow. It looks just like the Buttercup, like we expected it to. This one, because it's got the blue underneath it, the yellow, when it went over top, became a little bit green. All right, so just know your color theory and know what's going to happen when you do that. All right, so that's 2. The third way I want to show you, and I'm going to use the Distress Oxide here as well. So let me just clean off my stamp, my kissing stamp. All right, so I'm going to show you this third one. We're going to use the Aqua Sky again. So let me clean off my stamp and make sure that it is prepped and ready to go. All right, looks good. So I'm going to stamp first my background. All right, so this is if you're feeling particularly skillful and you know that you can accomplish this, especially if the stamp is easy to stamp. So you've got easy lines to match up here. So I've got my background down. Now I'm going to clean my stamp off. All right, and again, make sure it's nice and dry and dull looking, conditioned, ready to go. You can use your eraser again if you need to, you know, whatever you need to do to get that ready for the next step. Okay, so this is going to help you in a couple of ways. It may get you a more yellow look on your result here versus the green that kind of happened because we mixed 2 dye inks together. So using something like a pigment ink or a distress ink may get you better results in color definition, because a pigment ink is going to sit on top. It's not going to seep into the ink here. And the second reason why that may work out better is because now my stamp is clean, right? I've got my base image down first. So I'm going to pick up my butterfly image here. All right, so this is Distress Oxide. This is a pigment ink. I'm going to match up my stamps. And sometimes you have to like look right over the top of it to get everything perfectly aligned. And it takes a bit of concentration too. Right, I'm going to stamp that right on there. So if you can align your stamps in that way, you may get a better result with your color change as well. So this is turning just a little bit green, but not as much, because this particular oxide has got a little bit of transparency to it. It doesn't sit as heavy as other pigment inks. But there you go. So there is 3 ways for us to get our stamp kissing. So one last thing I wanted to share with you, I'm going to turn this over because it's not going to go into my book. I'm just going to write a note in my technique binder. Is that if you want to use words or numbers, here's a word stamp that I have. All right. When you stamp this, the words are going the right way. But let's think about this a little bit. So if I take my... let me grab a different color here. So I want to make sure that you really see this clearly. So here's our word stamp. And of course, if I were to actually like stamp my paper, the words would come out correctly, right? You can actually read the words here, okay? But if I do stamp kissing on a word or number stamp, what's going to happen? When I put my stamp down, the words are going to appear the correct way because I've kissed them together, and I didn't get a good imprint there, so let me try that again. All right, so I've got my words on here. Now, when I flip this over and look at it, the words are the correct way. So when I go to stamp this, the words are going to turn out backwards. And this is okay if you're wanting to create something that you can't actually read or that is maybe going to be covered up. You just want to have that look on there. So like if I was going to do a double stamp and I wanted something that was just really faint, maybe that wouldn't matter so much. But if you want it to be legible, if you don't want your numbers to be backwards or your words to be backwards, don't use a word stamp. You can't do it. So there you go. Some do's and don'ts on stamp kissing and a few different ways to accomplish the technique. I hope you enjoyed this technique and you add it into your toolbox sometime soon. When you give it a try, share it out on Instagram and tag me at Nicole Watt Creates. I always love to see what your creative mind is thinking. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. And until next time, happy crafting.